Our guest is a true pioneer in the world of content marketing who has spent 2 decades helping global brands develop intelligent content strategies to tell their stories more effectively. He's the author of many influential books on content marketing, and he is a true thought leader to marketers on everything from strategy to hiring talent and continues to push the industry forward, most recently through his work researching how AI is transforming content careers, which is the topic of today's discussion. Welcome, Robert Rose, Chief Strategy Advisor at the Content Marketing Institute.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm a fan of the show, and so I'm super happy to be here. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, delighted to have you on today, specifically because there is some new content from the Content Marketing Institute in the form of
Mm,
the 2024 Career and Salary Outlook Report. Um, could you give us a bit of a brief overview as to what you were really setting out to find out and how you went about putting the report together this year?
sure. So first of all, thank you for that. Yeah, so this is our second year to do this research, and the original intention behind the research, and this is going back to last year, and also as a through line for this year, was really to look at the career opportunities and current state of the industry when it comes to content marketing for salary, career path, and generally the things that practitioners of content marketing in business were facing. And so it's a way to look at where current salaries are, mostly US, even though we opened up it's a global research. We really started trying to limit it down to the US because it gets very complex to try and do it internationally. And we didn't want to sort of get out in front of our skis too much on that. But basically, looking at salary and career pathing, and this year we couldn't ignore the huge artificially intelligent elephant in the room, as it were, and so we specifically designed this year's research to look at the impact of what was going on in the world of AI, especially as it pertains to content marketers. And so, like last year, we had just a little bit more than 1,000 content marketers respond to the research, and then we've put together this research study as a result of that. And really, the story of AI is the story of 2023 for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid generative AI after November 30th last year and the launch of ChatGPT, which, yeah, it shook things up a little bit. I think that's a fair assessment.
I think yes, yes, said in the most English way ever. Yes, it definitely threw a little bit of a spanner in the works, as it were, and yes, it has disrupted. I mean, I think that's the overall headline is that it has been an extraordinarily disruptive new evolution, and I think we're still working out whether or not it's going to be a force for good or a force for evil or something in between. And I think that's ultimately what our research found, specifically with content marketers.
Yeah, so in terms of how it's changing the workflows of content marketers, then what were some of the key findings in that area?
Well, it's a mixed bag, really. But I think probably the headline or the sort of major takeaway would be that content marketers are a little freaked out right now. They are looking at the opportunities, experimenting with the technology, and doing the best they can to get better at it. But at the same time, there is an overwhelming sense that it's going to take jobs, that it's going to replace writers, that it's going to cause all kinds of disruption from an efficiency standpoint, and that there may be a real threat to their careers as a result of this. And I think, on the positive side, they're finding lots of good, interesting uses for it. The main one, and this is one finding that I was very heartened to see, and we can talk a little bit more about, sort of best practices, certainly. But um, the one that I was really heartened to see was that the main value that they seem to be getting out of it now is research and actually working with it to look at topics and look at the ability to find, what's not being talked about and all those kinds of things, and that writing assistance was really sort of down the list in terms of the current value that they're getting out of it. But I think overall, I think a lot of that is just it's a nature of the current sort of ad hoc experimentation that's going on right now because a lot of companies are still not really sure how this all integrates into their existing marketing workflows and how they're doing it. And there's, of course, concerns around intellectual property and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's, the research found that it was a mixed bag, but if I had to sort of move the needle one way, it's a little more on the freaked out side than on the positive side.
Yeah, there was one takeaway that I found, well, two actually that stood out in the stats. Uh,
Mm,
More than one in three, so 36% are using AI for writing, even though many of them feel conflicted about that. And I thought that
that's right.
was quite curious that people are seeing value in it, even though they know it's a potential threat to them. My personal take on that is it's a tool. And if you're a writer, you use it as a tool and you shouldn't feel conflicted. Good writers using it will get good outputs from it and it will assist you, but can't use it on its own. If it will give you crash a lot of the time, it will feel like a bot. The other thing that I found interesting was there was the question: do you use AI tools like ChatGPT for these content production tasks? And 25% said that they do not use AI tools. And that, based on my experience alone from recent conferences and workshops that I've ran, that's a high figure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I think both of those things are indicative of what we were just talking about, which is in many cases, we're finding that there are a lot of businesses out there that have said, no, we're not using, yeah, you can use it on your phone and you can sort of route around the institution of our current IT policy and those kinds of things. But especially in things like healthcare and financial services and those kinds of things, we're finding that there are a lot of companies that have said, not yet, right? So you're seeing a lot of those marketers, I think, basically experimenting at home to the extent that they are, or on their phone, or doing things that aren't part of their normal workday. And I also think, and I put this honestly at the feet of many of the vendors that are out there sort of hawking AI software. And a lot of it is, it reminds me so very much of, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the early dot-com days and some of the early tools that were out there for businesses. And it reminds me very much of that, this sort of get rich quick idea with many of these software vendors that are basically, the headline of their software is replace your writers and make it auto magical. And basically, you don't need to think about writing anymore. AI will do it. Our tool will do it all for you. And I think a lot of that marketing hype and a lot of that sales hype around the actual technology isn't going to the place that you're talking about, which is such the more nuanced, interesting conversation, which is it's just a tool that helps you expand your capabilities, but rather it's being marketed as a replacement. And so I think a lot of the content marketers out there and marketers in general are going, I believe it, right? And so they're trying to get good at it, using it to write sort of almost like you'd hate watch a show that you were told to watch, but you don't really wanna watch. It's like they're trying to get good at it, but they feel kinda icky about it.
Yeah, I think that's really reflected in the data. I've just got some of the stats from that. 62% say writers and editors will earn less respect.
Yeah.
55% writing will become commoditized. 46% fear lower compensation, and 45% predict fewer jobs for content marketers. So yeah, there is it's a pessimistic outlook.
It is, but I think it's going to turn. And I do believe it's going to turn, and we're even starting now just beginning to see there's some limitations here, right? There's some real limitations in the technology. There's some real accuracy problems that are only becoming a growing challenge, not necessarily a declining challenge. And yes, the technology will get better, and yes, the technology will get smarter. And there's a whole other conversation I'm sure you have on other shows about, sort of the general intelligence and AGI, and when it finally emerges and all those kinds of things. And those are certainly all concerning. But when it comes to just the current state of generative AI and content, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a turn where marketers are realizing that there are ways to use the tool that are expansive to their own talents and bring in the ability to have human empathy and contextual information and wisdom and the things and creativity and the things that humans can bring to bear that AI can't. And it can free you up to do more of those things rather than some of the derivative things that we have to do that basically just take a lot of time. And research is a great, is a great example of that.
Yeah, certainly within my own workflow, I find it's great for that summarization of content, which is, you take a long form piece and distill the key points and then decide whether you need to dive in and do a kind of a thorough read of it. I think it's great for that kind of thing. As a research aid, I think it is brilliant. I noticed in this report actually that there are some positives, certainly. I think nearly half of marketers said that they were actively interested in developing the skills required to work with these new technologies. Um, on that point, what skills do you think content marketers need in order to complement their creative abilities as AI usage inevitably grows within the industry?
Yeah, I think this is probably the heart of the most difficult question to answer right now. Um, because I'll tell you what it's not. It's not getting better at prompting. And this seems to be, when people say, because I often see that sort of, and again, I put this at the feet of many of the software vendors that are out there, and a number of the other companies that have sort of, claim to actually be masters at this, right? I always giggle a little bit when I see these companies out there saying, "We've mastered AI. We've mastered generative AI, and you can take our class or you can hire our consulting firm. We'll do that." I said, "You've been good at this exactly since November of last year. So nobody's good at this yet, right? We're all figuring this out as we go." And the interesting thing to me is that I always ask what does getting good at AI really mean in 2023 and probably into 2024 and beyond? And it's not going to be prompting, right? If there's anything that's going to get easier or more, more better interface, it's going to be the actual prompt itself. I mean, you think that there's improvement to make in generative AI. That's probably the biggest and most obvious place to get improvement. I think the hardest part of it right now is exactly what you said, which is getting good at it means figuring out how it integrates into your daily workflow, right? So, what is it useful for you as a practitioner or you as a business? Where does it provide the most value? For example, I think creating content is the least interesting thing that ChatGPT does. I think I take it at its name, right? I like chatting with it. I like actually talking with it and working out an idea and thinking about things and saying, help me organize this thought or help me write this summary or help me think through this topic," where Google can't really provide me that kind of interactive feedback. I find it to be really interesting in that sort of brainstorming, ideating, and working through topics and research that I'm doing for a particular piece, which accelerates my ability to be more creative and add my own spin to it. And so I think that's really the key, is that getting good at it right now is figuring out, which is a very unsatisfactory answer, by the way, to, figure out how it works best for you. It means go work with it, right? Go work with it and find out where it really works best for you. And just know that nobody knows more than you at this point, right? There's just people who've used it a little longer.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice. I was speaking to Jim Stern at the Digital Analytics Association recently. We were talking
Yeah,
about what
I love Jim. Yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy, and we were talking about prompting, and he it's actually something he said at his conference talk at MACON as well, where he said to be a good prompter in any particular subject area, you need to be a subject matter expert, right? You've got to know your brief in order to know how to ask the right questions to get the good
Fair enough,
responses.
yes.
And I think that that works with any field, whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to write good copy, then you need to know how to write good copy in the first place in order to craft the prompt to get good copy out of it. If I'm looking for it to give me good advice on a particular topic, it helps if I have some understanding of that topic in order to be able to get the best outputs and understand where it might be going off piste a little bit or where it's giving me a bit of a thin answer, so to speak.
I think that's really great advice. But what's implicit in that advice is that it's an efficiency, not a specific skill. In other words, knowing how to ask great questions is a more efficient way to getting to your end goal. In a Socratic method or whatever you want to, whatever however you want to think about it. And it does require knowledge of the subject to ask a great question in order to get insightful answers in return. What I find so interesting is that when prompting is promoted as some sort of weird secret hieroglyphic syntax creation, very much, by the way, like HTML was in the early days, right? It's like, "Ooh, you know how to do HTML, you're some sort of secret code god," right? And of course, the coders would sit back and giggle at that. But the idea that we're not gonna make that process easier, so that you don't have to have a prompt that's, 500 words to get a good image out of Midjourney or something like that is just wrong. They will improve that, and it's already happening. Some of the software that I've seen recently is like literally fill in the blanks and the AI will write a great prompt for you.
Mm. Yeah, and you actually see this to a certain extent within Midjourney as an example. You can ask it to basically shorten your prompt, and it will
Yeah,
tell you which text is superfluous to the prompt, and it will strip that out right back to its bare bones. Or you can put an image in and it will describe the scene to tell you what you should put in order to get a similar image next time around. So yeah, I think the next iteration of developments from an AI perspective are going to be on the UI UX side and
totally.
how it makes it
100%.
easier.
100%.
On that note, then, so in terms of the kind of toolkit for content marketers on an AI tip, obviously we have ChatGPT, and most people have at least dabbled with that in to some extent. Are there any other tools that you would recommend a content marketer play with, even from a content strategy perspective? Anything with an AI, maybe NLP bent or anything like that that's
Well,
interesting?
yeah, I think, the most interesting work there is a lot of the companies that are coming out now, I think the most interesting layer that they add is the ability for the AI to save and learn from the business, from the institution, or from me, right? In other words, to save and to learn my content so that it becomes part of the corpus and the learning model that is used for my ongoing work. So, without naming any vendors in particular, basically what I'm finding is that those, and they're not terribly high priced products, but they're more than just the $20 a month, subscription to ChatGPT. But they do offer things like having a specific centralized repository for all of our brand guidelines and for our terminology and for the way that we speak about things and our brand architecture and tone and editorial guidelines and those kinds of things. And then doing things like, there's one case study in particular that I love where a company made an acquisition of a smaller company, and they wanted to transform all 800 blog posts of the smaller company into the editorial guidelines of the newer company. And so they had AI do that, basically rewrite the 800 blog posts so that it would reflect the right ideas there. And I think that's a really interesting use case for how generative AI can be used to create derivative content, but then basically improve it so that it's actually matching the tone, the guidelines, and the editorial strategy of what it is we're doing. So those are the tools that I think are most interesting, the ones that actually help us speak more clearly or speak in a more structured way and help with our SEO and do all those kinds of things. Basically unburden our teams from some of the derivative things that we have to do as part of our jobs, writing that webinar abstract, writing the summary of the podcast episode, writing and then freeing us up to create hopefully more impactful creative content on the backside of things. Those are the tools that I'm most interested in and then you start to get into some of the workflow automation, like, automatically responding to emails and some of those things, which I'm a little on the fence about, but I certainly see them from an efficiency standpoint, from a CRM standpoint, some of the Salesforce types of ideas and how that's getting used to create, you know, drip campaigns and some of those more, I guess they're derivative content, but really just the idea of, how do you create content automatically and personalized on the fly is sort of that kind of idea. So I would explore those kinds of tools if I were in a bigger marketing team, and that's where our focus is right now with the clients that we deal with every day.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip on what to look for when selecting any of these tools. But just back to the report on the skills as a follow on to that, I know one of the
Yeah.
questions was asking about career advancement. And I think about a quarter of marketers believe that their company provides a clear career advancement path.
Yeah.
So, in light of AI disruption, why is this such a problem? And how can companies adapt to make sure that they're retaining the experienced talent that they've got in house?
This is my favorite part of the research, and it's the original reason we got into this research in the begin with, was because of the what we believed anecdotally, and it turned out to be true, was that there was really no place for content marketers to go within most large organizations, right? Because you basically had one of three choices. Once you reached sort of senior manager status, sort of just beyond sort of the single contributor and into sort of managing a small team, there was really no place to go in most businesses from a career pathing standpoint. You either one found another corollary job at another company, another content marketing job doing the exact same thing at another company. Two, you matriculated up to some other job in marketing, right? Some other basically non-content marketing role. So if you wanted to go to director, you got to go to product or you got to go to comms or you got to go somewhere else. Or three, they jump out and they sort of abandon ship and start their own consultancy, right? So those are kind of the three options that they had. And as it turns out, last year we found that exactly to be true. And I think AI has only complicated that over the course of the year because now we're seeing that even more so is that companies don't have career paths for content marketing or content practitioners full stop. And arguably, it's because they've really created a confusing career path in marketing more broadly, right? It's because it used to be back when I didn't have so much gray hair that you joined a company and you could, easily matriculate up through, I become a manager, then I become a director, then I become a senior director, then I become a VP, and then hopefully I become part of the C suite. Well, that doesn't really exist anymore because marketing has basically siloed off. There's now social media and there's brand teams and web teams and content teams and now AI teams and even digital marketing versus regular old marketing, and so it becomes very confusing for marketers generally, but content marketers specifically to find their way. And so what we see and reflected is that many of them just have sort of, eh, they've given up, right? In terms of trying to find a career pathing that makes sense for them. And so when you ask how can companies really retain the talent that they have in their content marketers, it's make it a thing, right? Create a career path so that I don't have to jettison after I become a single level contributor and I can actually build my strategic career off the back of saying, I can matriculate all the way up to the C suite. I can become CMO. You've got to create that belief in the content marketing team in order to make them not feel like they have to jettison out at some point because there's no room for them there.
Do you think there's well, those people in the C-suite that aren't looking at content marketing as its standalone thing, what do you think that's going to take to get that shift to make them see the value in doing that? I've heard when we've spoken within the industry for years about companies thinking more like publishers, and
Yep.
you see some companies taking that very literally and buying, HubSpot buying the Hustle and various.
Yeah.
Well, not that they weren't thinking like a publisher anyway. I think
Right.
they were already on that tip. But what's it going to take for organizations to make that leap to give that career path if they're not already in that mindset?
Yeah. I think it's going to come to the realization that really getting good at content, and I mean this from not just acting like a publisher or acting like a media company, but getting good at content means acting in many ways like a media company. So in other words, I think marketing, generally speaking, is becoming more like content marketing than content marketing is integrating into marketing, right? Businesses are slowly realizing that their ability to create multi-channel content-driven experiences is the way forward, right? That's the way forward for advertising. It's the way forward, which we would largely call paid media. It's the way forward for our owned media experiences, our websites, our blogs, our resource centers, everything we're doing, our email newsletters, our podcasts. All of those kinds of things are becoming more and more important, not less and less. And so our ability to speak clearly, with clarity, and with an impact that gets beyond all of the other things that are vying for our audience's attention is a core fundamental part of modern marketing. Full stop. And so making content a strategic function in the business and not just an aspect of everybody else's job, right? My little tweetable moment that I often get quoted on is that content is everybody's job and nobody's strategy. And so for most businesses, they have to come to that realization to make content as functional a part of the business as accounting or legal or marketing or sales or any other part of the thing that we care deeply about. And that includes the use of AI as a fundamental platform by which we build content as a strategic function. And I think it takes that level of realization to go, it's not marketing ourselves like a publishing company. It's not selling ourselves like a media company. It's operating like a media company does and how they operate and creating content as a strategic function that is the key to modern marketing. And without that realization, I think they will always be working with one hand tied behind their back. And that means at some level, making content a true career level kind of position within the organization.
And I dare say that anyone wanting to know more about that subject could find out in the upcoming book due out in September.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you to say. Yes, indeed. That is really the theme and the topic of my upcoming book. Yeah.
So to flip that, and not looking at people who are, that maybe reached the ceiling at content. What about people at the start of their content marketing careers? Maybe
Mm.
early career, they've just come into a team, they're doing the content thing, but they're concerned about AI. What career advice would you give to those in the marketplace now?
It's really understanding your role as content practitioner isn't typing words or making pictures. The differentiator that you have is that you are you and that you bring a certain level of ideas and thinking to the table that AI just simply can't bring. And so what that means is getting good at something other than typing out words. And what I mean by that is that whether that's for you getting really deep into a particular vertical and becoming a subject matter expert in that vertical, and so that you know what the trends are, or you know how to position things, or you know how to strategically engage as a more expert level audience, or you can address things, becoming really good, think of it like becoming a really good journalist, right? Great journalists are also typically subject matter experts in the thing that they really cover, whether that's politics or legal or finance or healthcare. They become strategic subject matter experts in those topics. That's key, or becoming more horizontally strategic. In other words, becoming a business strategist or becoming a marketing strategist or becoming a media strategist or becoming a overall sort of strategic part of providing counsel to whoever it is you work for. That's the key layer. Finding a layer that goes beyond just simply writing or creating pretty pictures and saying, yes, I can do that. I'm a great writer. I'm an amazing writer, but I also offer strategic thinking on X or strategic capabilities on Y or all of those things. And adding that to your sort of quiver full of arrows in terms of where you are marketing yourselves to what kinds of companies and where you want to work, or if you want to go out on your own, that's the critical piece. It's really at the broadest sense, adding wisdom to your skill sets. And by wisdom, what I mean is the combination of experience and insight and the ability to express the sort of fusion of that experience and insight into something that can provide judgment on a particular topic. And bringing that wisdom is going to be a differentiator to AI always.
Yeah, I think the entry point for so many people is, oh, I enjoy writing. I can write well. And that will take you so far. But it's
Sure.
that next level is so important. On that point about judgment, though, that's such an interesting one. Wired magazine's article that they published a few months back about how they will and won't use generative AI
Mm,
touched on that very issue, where it spoke about they won't use generative AI for writing full articles, except where the fact that it was written by AI is the very point of the article. Um, but also that they won't use generative AI for editing because editing requires judgment and human
Yeah,
judgment about
indeed.
what's
That's
important,
it, right? Yep.
what angle is what. So, yeah, I think that's such an important takeaway for people is that editing isn't going to be replaced by AI anytime soon.
It's a great point. Yes, it's a and as we all know, those of us who've had any level of experience to writing is rewriting, right? Writing is editing. Just getting your idea out on the screen or on a piece of paper is, that first draft. Anybody can do that. It then takes the special skill of being able to mold that and shape it into something that is truly valuable. That's the real skill. And to your point, AI is not terribly good at that. Um, it's good at organizing patterns and recognizing patterns. So when you think of things like, writing a summary of the last football game, or looking at the, financial results of an analyst that says, here's what the company did, in the last quarter, basically organizing facts and figures into a readable paragraph. AI is great at that. What it's not great at is saying, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean that Meta had a great quarter? What does that mean to the future of social media? That's the real key of becoming a true wisdom creator.
Yeah, why is it important that
Why
something
is it important?
is
Exactly right.
so? Yeah, looking ahead, what do you think are the big priorities then for organizations that are looking to integrate AI into their content marketing teams?
It's the same priorities that I would put for any technology, which is, and this is one of the challenges that we've seen with so many marketing technologies over the last 20 years, which is many businesses tend to put the cart before the horse. And what they do is they say, ah, there's a new technology that can help me with X. How do we do X? Right. And how do we figure that out? And so they add X and don't have any clue as to how it will actually help them further their strategy. And so what we say is, it seems like a no duh, but it's rare that it happens, is you've actually got to figure out what your desired workflow, your desired process, your desired activities for your strategy are. Then go, okay, where are the gaps that we have in terms of our ability to scale that with a tool? And figuring that out, then you go, great, AI can fit in this gap and this gap and this gap. Now you're prepared to actually go out and look for a solution that can fill those gaps, because you know what you're looking to actually, you're looking for the tool that actually helps you scale the process, which is all technology is a tool to help you scale a human driven process.
Yeah, start by identifying the use case, like
Yeah,
looking at
absolutely.
where that bottleneck might be in your content production or something like that. Yeah, I think that's a um, entirely pragmatic, but also an important step for people to undertake. Just looking at the report, then I'm interested in anything that you thought was particularly surprising.
So I'll point to 2 things, one of them having to do with AI, which was, and I mentioned it earlier in the show, which is I'm heartened, and was a little surprised actually by the top uses, the top values that content marketers are getting out of it. I expected it to be, you know, it helps me write blogs easier, or it helps me write, an ebook faster, and all of that. And I was really heartened by how low writing assistance actually came down on the list, and how high things like research and looking at topics and using it as a research assistant kind of thing. I was really heartened by how high that was on the list. And that gives me hope that content marketers are actually really figuring this out. Like, they're really starting to identify where the real value of a tool like this can be, and not be so scared of it, which is a great thing in my mind. The second thing that I would mention is on the career pathing side, um, how high actually, and it was just over half, I believe, if I'm remembering the number correctly, of content marketers that feel good, that are enjoying their job, that are basically, that generally speaking, the interesting tension is that most content marketers now in their work are happy with their work. So that's a big shift over the last 10 years, certainly anecdotally, and then from our research last year, is that how many of them are actually enjoying the work, enjoying, and finding it meaningful, which is a huge piece, by the way, of what most content marketers are looking for in a position is the meaningful work part of it. And so I'm really heartened again by that, about the future of content marketing, by knowing how many content marketers are actually feeling good about it. But then you sort of add that tension of, yeah, but if a new job comes along, I'm ready to jump out the window, right? I am ready to go. So it basically tells me that the work needs to be done on the business side. We need to make content marketing a much more strategic function because they're finding great value, they're meaningful work, there's success to be had. We're just providing a career dead end that can easily be overcome, and it can actually become a differentiator for talent acquisition in the years to come. So those were actually my two biggest surprises in the research, and both of them on the positive side.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely place to wrap it up, actually. There is an optimism, even though we started off somewhat pessimistically looking at it, there is generally a sense of enjoyment in the work that people are doing. If I remember rightly, salaries were quite healthy. People seem to be
Yes, indeed. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's it's a little it gets a little funky with trying to do salaries because of urban versus suburban and regions of the US is just a very large country, so it gets a little weird. But yes, generally speaking across the board, yeah, salaries are pretty healthy for content. So businesses are valuing it, but it's interesting, they're valuing it only at the execution level. They're not valuing it all the way up the chain.
yeah, and that is where the real work is yet
That's
to
where
be
the real
done.
work begins. Exactly.
So leadership teams pay attention and make it
Exactly.
a strategic function. So where can our listeners download the report?
They can head on over to contentmarketinginstitute.com. So you can download the report and hopefully get a ton of value out of it.
Thank you very much. Well, really enjoyed this discussion. So thank you very much for joining us, Robert.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Artificially Intelligent Marketing. To stay on top of the latest trends, tips, and tools in the world of marketing AI, be sure to subscribe. We look forward to seeing you again next week.